What if I told you someone has lied to you this week and you smiled back at them without knowing? Not a big lie, not a life-altering secret. Just a small, silent deception, the kind that passes through conversations unnoticed, the kind that slips between your trust and your perception. The scariest lies are not spoken. They leak through the eyes, through the way someone breathes, through the tiny pauses, the hesitation between words, the subtle shifts in posture, the flicker of emotion that vanishes before you can name it. And here's the unsettling truth. Once you see them, once you notice the hidden patterns, the unspoken cues, the betrayals disguised as casual smiles, you can never unsee them. Pause. Let that sink in. Low, intimate tone. Your world will change. Not because people are worse than you thought, but because your awareness has sharpened. Somewhere right now, someone is concealing truth in plain sight. And your eyes, your instincts are about to catch what most people miss. Today, we decode the human lie detector. We'll explore the hidden language of micro-expressions, body whispers, verbal leakage, and even the lies you tell yourself. We'll teach you to see patterns, read the subtle signs, and reclaim clarity in a world built on half-truths. So lean in, listen closely, because what you're about to discover may change the way you perceive every conversation, every glance, every smile, forever. Why we fear being fooled. You have been lied to before. Not just casually, not just socially, you have felt it, that strange shift in the air. That moment when something didn't align but you ignored it. You smiled, you nodded, you trusted, and later you realized the truth wasn't what hurt the most. It was the fact that you didn't see it. That is the wound we rarely talk about. There is a reason deception feels so personal to you, so destabilizing, so humiliating. Your brain reacts to lies the same way it reacts to physical danger. When someone betrays you, your nervous system doesn't treat it like a simple misunderstanding. It treats it like a threat to survival. Because for most of human history, it was. As of years ago, being deceived inside your tribe could mean exile. Exile meant isolation. Isolation meant death. So your brain evolved to scan for betrayal the way it scans for predators in the dark. And yet, you still miss it. You still get fooled. Why? Here is something uncomfortable. You don't fear lies because you hate dishonesty. You fear lies because deception threatens your sense of control. When you trust someone, you build a prediction model in your mind. You think you know who they are. You think you know how they will behave. A lie shatters that model. Suddenly, the world feels unstable, and your brain hates instability. This is why betrayal hurts deeper than physical pain. Physical pain is localized. It fades. But betrayal rewrites memory. It makes you question your judgment, your intuition, your intelligence. And that feels dangerous. You may even tell yourself you're not that naive. You're observant, thoughtful, careful with people. But here's something that surprises most intelligent listeners. Why intelligent people get fooled more often? Because intelligence increases narrative ability. You are skilled at explaining behavior, at rationalizing inconsistencies, at filling in missing pieces with logical stories. When someone hesitates before answering, you supply a reason. When someone's tone shifts, you interpret it generously. When something feels off, you override the signal with analysis. Analysis. Your intelligence becomes a shield, not against lies, but against your own suspicion. You don't want to believe someone close to you is deceiving you. So you construct a more comfortable explanation, and the lie survives. There's another layer. Your brain is wired for connection before accuracy. Let that sink in. Connection feels safe. Belonging feels stabilizing. So when you face a choice between preserving the relationship or confronting a possible lie, your nervous system often chooses the relationship, even if it costs you truth. This is not weakness. This is biology. Imagine this scenario. Someone you care about tells you something that doesn't quite add up. Their smile is tight, their voice slightly strained. For half a second, just half, you notice a flicker of tension in their eyes, and then it's gone. You felt it, but you dismissed it. Why? Because detecting deception requires you to tolerate discomfort. And most people would rather feel temporarily secure than momentarily suspicious. That is the paradox. If deception is so dangerous, Why are we so bad at detecting it? Because your brain prioritizes emotional stability over forensic accuracy. Here's the surprising insight. The pain of betrayal activates the same neural pathways as physical injury. Research in social neuroscience shows that rejection and deception light up regions associated with physical pain processing. Your body doesn't know the difference between a broken bone and a broken trust. This is why betrayal trauma lingers, why you replay conversations, why you analyze tone, why you wake up at 2 a.m. reconstructing moments. Your mind is trying to prevent future danger. It's updating its threat detection system, but here's where it becomes complicated. Sometimes the system overcorrects. After being deceived, you may become hypervigilant, reading into every pause, every delayed text, every shift in posture. You swing from blind trust to constant suspicion. Neither state is clarity. Clarity lives somewhere in between. You are not afraid of lies. You are afraid of being blind. You are afraid of investing time, emotion, loyalty into a reality that isn't real. Because when reality fractures, identity trembles. Who were you in that moment? The trusting one, the naive one, the manipulated one. These labels echo loudly. But here's something gentle and important. Being deceived does not mean you are foolish. It means you are human. Trust is not stupidity. It is social glue. Without it, society collapses. So your system is built to trust by default and detect anomalies only when they cross a threshold. The problem is, skilled deceivers operate below that threshold. They don't scream lies. They whisper them. They embed them inside partial truths. They align just enough with your expectations to avoid triggering alarms. And because you fear false accusations more than hidden deception, you hesitate. You wait. You give the benefit of the doubt. And sometimes that delay costs you. Take a breath here. Notice something. You are listening to this because you want clarity, not paranoia. Not cynicism? Clarity. You don't want to distrust everyone. You simply don't want to be blindsided again. That desire is healthy, but recalibration requires understanding something deeper. Deception is ancient, but so is detection. You already possess subtle instincts, microsensations, intuitive flickers. The question is not whether you can detect lies. The question is whether you can tolerate what you see. Because here's the final tension of this chapter. If deception is so dangerous, why are we so bad at detecting it? Is it lack of skill? Or is it that part of you would rather not know? In the next chapter, we will begin dismantling the biggest myth about liars, the idea that they look dishonest. But for now, sit with this. Notice your past moments of doubt, the tiny signals you ignored, the explanations you created, not with judgment, with curiosity. And ask yourself gently, when the next flicker appears, will you see it? The myth of the obvious liar. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture a liar. What do you see? Shifty eyes, fidgeting hands, a nervous voice, someone who can't hold eye contact. Now let me ask you something uncomfortable. What if that image is the very reason you miss deception? You have been trained, by movies, by crime shows, by cultural folklore, to believe that dishonesty looks obvious, that guilt sweats, that lies tremble, that truth stands tall and steady. But real life is quieter than fiction, and deception is rarely dramatic. You think you're good at spotting lies because you look for nervousness, but nervousness is not guilt, and looking away is not deception. In fact, the calmest person in the room may be the most deceptive. Let that settle. When someone avoids eye contact, your brain flags it. When someone stutters, you notice. When someone fidgets, your suspicion rises. But here's what most people don't realize. Anxious people look guilty even when they're innocent, and skilled liars often look completely at ease. So your instincts may be reacting, just not to what you think. Imagine two people. The first is being falsely accused of something minor. Their heart races, their palms sweat, they struggle to speak clearly, they look nervous. The second person is lying deliberately. They anticipated the question, they rehearsed the answer, they breathe slowly, they maintain eye contact, they look confident. If you had to choose, who appears more trustworthy? Exactly. Confidence is often rehearsed, and nervousness is often fear of not being believed. Here's where it becomes subtle. Your brain associates smooth delivery with honesty. But fluency is not truth. Fluency is preparation. When someone lies intentionally, they often simplify their body language. They reduce movement. They control their breathing. They anchor their gaze. They know what suspicion looks like, so they avoid. This creates a dangerous illusion. Composure equals innocence. But composure can be strategy. You might be thinking now, then what am I supposed to look for? Stay with that question, because the problem is not that you're blind. The problem is that you're watching the wrong signals. Here's a surprising insight. Research in behavioral psychology has shown that people are only slightly better than chance at detecting lies. Even trained professionals, police officers, judges, intelligence agents. Not because they're incompetent, but because humans are biased toward believing others. It's called the truth default. Your brain assumes honesty unless given overwhelming evidence otherwise. Why? Because constant suspicion would exhaust you. Imagine if you doubted every sentence spoken to you, every compliment, every explanation, every apology. You wouldn't function socially. So your brain conserves energy by assuming truth, until something breaks the pattern. But here's the twist. Most lies are designed not to break patterns. They are designed to fit inside them. A skilled deceiver doesn't create chaos. They create consistency. They mirror your expectations. They align with your beliefs. They echo your language. And because you expect a liar to look anxious, you overlook the composed one. Pause for a moment. Think about someone you trusted deeply. Did they look suspicious? Or did they feel safe? Safety is not proof of honesty. Sometimes it is proof of familiarity. And familiarity lowers your guard. This is where many intelligent people fall into a subtle trap. You believe that because you can read people emotionally, you can detect dishonesty. You sense tension. You sense discomfort. You sense awkwardness. But discomfort can mean many things. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, social anxiety, past trauma. You may be mislabeling anxiety as deceit and missing deception when it hides behind smooth calmness. Let me slow this down. Looking away does not equal lying. In some cultures, direct eye contact is disrespectful. In anxious personalities, eye contact increases stress. In trauma survivors, gaze aversion is self-protection. If you equate eye movement with guilt, you will misjudge people. And worse, you will trust the wrong ones. Here's another subtle layer. When someone lies, their biggest fear is not moral failure. It is exposure. So they focus less on controlling emotion and more on controlling perception. They manage posture. They regulate tone. They rehearse simplicity. They look stable. But stability can be manufactured. Now ask yourself something quietly. Have you ever mistaken nervousness for guilt? Have you ever doubted someone simply because they seemed uncomfortable? And have you ever trusted someone simply because they seemed confident? This chapter is not about making you suspicious of calm people. It is about breaking a false rule your mind has relied on. The rule that liars look like villains. They don't. They look ordinary. Sometimes they look reassuring. Sometimes they look charming. Sometimes they look like you. There's something humbling about that realization because it forces you to release simplistic shortcuts. You cannot rely on eye contact alone. You cannot rely on fidgeting alone. You cannot rely on confidence alone. Deception is rarely found in single behaviors. It lives in inconsistencies, in micro moments, in subtle mismatches between emotion and expression. But that is for the next layer. For now, sit with this discomfort. The obvious liar is mostly a myth. The exaggerated cues you were taught to watch for are often signs of anxiety, not dishonest. And the composed, steady presence you instinctively trust may simply be well practiced. Take a slow breath. Feel the shift. If lies don't look like lies, what do they look like? Micro-expressions, the 0.5-second betrayal. Watch closely, not at the words. At the moment before the words, there is a fraction of a second, less than half a heartbeat, where the truth escapes. And most people miss it. You've seen it before. That flicker across someone's face, that tiny tightening around the mouth, that flash in the eyes that disappears almost instantly. You sensed it. Micro-expressions are involuntary facial movements that last less than half a second. They occur when someone tries to suppress a real emotion and replace it with a socially acceptable one. The suppression is conscious, the leak is not, and that leak is your window. You are not bad at detecting lies. You are simply not trained to notice speed. Your brain processes facial expressions quickly, but your conscious awareness lags behind. So when a suppressed emotion flashes for 0.2 seconds, you feel something, but you can't label it. It registers as something felt off, and then the conversation continues. Let's slow this down. Imagine someone telling you, "I'm really happy for you." Their voice sounds warm. Their smile looks correct. But for a split second, just before the smile settles, one corner of their lip tightens upward. That is not happiness. That is contempt. Contempt lasts less than a second, but it destroys relationships. Why? Because contempt signals superiority, judgment, disrespect. And even if you don't consciously notice it, your nervous system does. You feel distance, coldness, a subtle fracture. Here's the first micro-expression you must learn: fear. Fear is fast. It flashes in widened eyes, raised eyebrows, tension in the lower eyelids, lips slightly stretched horizontally. When someone is lying and afraid of being caught, fear often leaks before they compose themselves. But be careful. Fear does not always mean deception. It can mean anxiety. It can mean insecurity. It can mean fear of not being believed. This is where nuance matters. You are not looking for emotion alone. You are looking for emotional incongruence. If someone claims confidence, but fear flashes across their face, that mismatch is your signal. Second, contempt. This one is subtle but powerful. One side of the mouth lifts slightly, almost like a smirk, sometimes paired with a brief eye roll or tightening of the cheek. Contempt is asymmetrical, and it is dangerous, because contempt rarely appears in truthful admiration. It appears when someone feels superior, but is pretending not to. If you ever see contempt flash while someone expresses affection or agreement, pause internally. You may be witnessing a fracture beneath the surface. Third, disgust. Disgust wrinkles the nose, raises the upper lip, creates tension around the mouth. It is quick, almost reflexive. Disgust can signal moral rejection. If someone verbally aligns with you, but flashes disgust, there is conflict inside them, and conflict under pressure often leads to deception. Now here's the surprising insight. Micro-expressions are not rare. They happen constantly. But most of them are not about lying. They are about emotional leakage. This means something important. Not every leak equals deception. Sometimes it equals hidden resentment, unspoken disagreement, suppressed jealousy, private doubt. And this is why micro-expressions are not lie detectors by themselves. They are emotional detectors. They reveal what someone is trying to hide, not necessarily why. Take a breath here. You are not hunting for villains. You are observing incongruence. Words say one thing, face says another. That space between the two is where truth hides. Let's test your awareness. Picture someone apologizing. "I'm really sorry." Their tone sounds sincere, but before their face settles into regret, you see a flash of irritation, just for a split second. What does that tell you? Maybe they regret being confronted, not the action. That difference matters. Here's something most people don't know. Even trained actors struggle to suppress micro-expressions fully. They can mask emotions with larger expressions, but the first flicker often escape because emotional processing in the brain happens before conscious regulation. Emotion first, control second, and in that gap, truth leaks. You might be wondering, if these signals are so quick, how can I possibly catch them? The answer is not intensity, it's baseline. You don't scan strangers aggressively, you observe patterns. How does this person normally react? How do they normally smile? How do their eyes move when relaxed? Once you know baseline behavior, deviations become visible. You're not looking for drama, you're looking for drama. You're looking for change. Pause. Think of someone close to you. Can you picture their genuine smile? Now imagine the difference when it's forced. Your body already knows. You just haven't slowed down enough to study it. This is where your perception sharpens, not by becoming suspicious, but by becoming attentive. Micro-expressions are whispers, and whispers require quiet observers. There is something humbling about this skill. Because once you begin noticing microflashes, you will see emotional complexity everywhere. People laughing while briefly flashing sadness. People congratulating while flashing envy. People agreeing while flashing doubt. It does not make the world darker. It makes it more layered. But remember this carefully. Faces can be trained. People can practice neutral expressions. They can rehearse smiles. They can discipline their reactions. The face is expressive and therefore controllable. But faces can be trained. Bodies are harder to silence. The body never lies, but it whispers. Look at the feet, not the eyes, not the smile, not the perfectly rehearsed sentence. Look at the feet, because while the face performs, the body prepares to escape. You've been taught to watch eye contact, to analyze tone, to decode words, but deception often leaks downward. And most people never look there. Here's something subtle. The body moves before the mind edits. The first movement is the honest one, before someone constructs their answer. Before they assemble composure, their nervous system fires a signal. A shoulder tightens, a foot shifts, a blink rate changes, a hand reaches instinctively for comfort, and then control returns. But you can learn to see that first ripple. Let's begin with something almost nobody studies. Feet direction. Feet reveal intention. Feet reveal intention. When someone wants to leave, even unconsciously, their feet often angle toward the nearest exit. Even if their torso faces you, even if their eyes stay locked on yours. The body orients toward desire, and desire is difficult to fake. If someone claims engagement but their feet repeatedly point away, there is internal conflict. Maybe discomfort, maybe impatience, maybe concealment. The feet are honest because we rarely think to control them. Now consider shoulders. When someone is relaxed, their shoulders hang naturally. When someone is defensive or withholding, tension gathers subtly, not dramatic, not theatrical, just slightly elevated, slightly rigid, slightly compressed. Shoulders carry psychological weight. When someone offers reassurance but their shoulders tighten at the same moment, that incongruence matters. Let's slow the pace. Think of the last time someone gave you an excuse. Pause here. Picture it clearly. Their words, their posture, their breathing. Did they lean forward or pull back? Did they expand or shrink? Did their body open or close? You may not have analyzed it consciously, but your body noticed. It always does. Here's a behavior you've seen hundreds of times. Self-soothing gestures, touching the neck, rubbing the hands together, pressing fingers against the lips, adjusting clothing unnecessarily. When stress rises, the body seeks regulation. These gestures are attempts to calm the nervous system. Now listen carefully. Stress does not equal deception, but deception often creates stress. The key is context. If a question triggers a sudden increase in self-soothing behaviors, that spike is information, not proof. Information, not proof. Information. Here's the surprising insight. Blink rate is one of the most reliable stress indicators. When under pressure, some people blink rapidly. Others freeze, blinking less than normal. After a lie, blink rate often rebounds dramatically. This happens because cognitive load increases. Lying requires construction. Truth requires recall. Construction consumes energy, and the body reacts. You may never consciously count blinks, but you can sense rhythm shifts. Sudden dryness in the eyes, rapid fluttering, a long stare followed by exaggerated blinking. The rhythm changes when the mind strains. There is something deeply human about this. Your body is not trying to betray you. It is trying to protect you. Deception creates internal conflict. Conflict activates the stress response. Stress leaks through physiology. The body whispers what the mouth edits. But remember this. Some people live in chronic stress, anxiety disorders, trauma histories, high-pressure personalities. Their baseline may already include tension, blinking shifts, or self-soothing gestures. That's why you must always establish baseline first. How does this person behave when relaxed? When telling a simple story? When discussing neutral topics? Without baseline, you are guessing. With baseline, you are observing change. And change is the signal. Let's return to something subtle. When someone is asked a difficult question, watch the sequence. Do they immediately answer, or is there a micro-freeze? Do their eyes move first? Does their body shift before their voice responds? The first movement is the honest one. The body reacts before the narrative forms. If you ask, well, were you there last night? And you see a quick shoulder lift, a foot retreat, a blink freeze, that pre-verbal reaction is often more truthful than the sentence that follows. Notice how different this is from paranoia. You are not accusing. You are not confronting. You are observing. Quietly, curiously, you are gathering patterns. There's another layer most people overlook. Distance. When people lie, they sometimes increase physical distance subtly, leaning back, angling the torso away, creating space. Distance regulates discomfort. If someone's words express closeness, but their body creates space, there is tension. And tension tells a story. Now take a breath. This skill requires patience. You will not master it overnight. But once you begin watching feet instead of eyes, once you begin noticing the first movement instead of the rehearsed one, once you begin sensing rhythm shifts instead of dramatic cues, you will see differently. Conversations will feel slower, richer, layered. But here is something important. The body can adapt. With enough practice, people can reduce obvious tells. They can control posture. They can train stillness. It is difficult, but not impossible. Which means this is not the final layer. There is something deeper, more revealing, more difficult to conceal. And then there's something even more revealing than the body. Something inside you has already shifted. When we began, this felt like a skill, a tool, a way to protect yourself from strangers, from manipulators, from distant threats. But now, you're realizing something uncomfortable. This isn't about strangers. It's about the people close to you, and maybe about noticing yourself. Think back, have you ever sensed a shift in someone you trust and ignored it? A hesitation in their words, a tension in their posture, a smile that didn't reach the eyes you noticed and told yourself you were overthinking. Why? Because seeing the truth means you might have to act, and acting risks loss. Here's the deeper truth. Your brain fears not just lies, it fears what knowing will cost. Confrontation can destabilize relationships, and sometimes protecting the bond feels safer than knowing the truth. But there's another layer. You're not just afraid of others lying. You're afraid of discovering the ways you've lied to yourself. That instinct you dismissed, that red flag you reframed. The most revealing lies are quiet, repeated, subtle, and they leave patterns. Patterns are harder to fake than moments, tone shifts that recur, gestures that repeat, stories that evolve slowly. Notice the repetition, and the truth becomes impossible to ignore. You are not becoming paranoid. You are becoming precise. Observation, patience, recognition of patterns. This is where your power grows. And now, the next layer is coming. Psychological loops liars repeat unconsciously. Language, habits, emotional distancing. Once you see these, you can't unsee them. Stay with me. The most revealing layer is about to unfold. The language of deception, verbal leakage. Listen carefully, not to what is being said, to how much is being said, because liars tell longer stories. When someone is telling the truth, memory does most of the work. They recall, they report, they stop. But when someone is constructing a version of reality, they must build it in real time, and construction requires material. Extra words, extra details, extra decoration. Truth is simple. Lies are decorated. You've heard it before. You ask a simple question. Were you there? And instead of a simple answer, you receive a narrative. Well, technically, I stopped by for a minute. But that was only because earlier in the day I had already told him I might swing through. And you know how traffic is around that area. So it wasn't even really a visit. Notice the expansion. Notice the scaffolding. The brain under pressure tries to control perception. And one way it does that is by overwhelming you with information. Because if you're busy processing details, you're less likely to examine structure. Here's something subtle. When people lie, they often believe that more detail equals more credibility. So they decorate specific times, precise descriptions, unnecessary side notes. But unnecessary detail is often a distraction. It creates the illusion of transparency. Yet transparency does not require excess. Pause here. Think of a time someone over-explained something minor. Did the volume of information calm you, Or did it create a faint sense of strain? Your nervous system recognizes cognitive effort, and effort has texture. There's another pattern: distancing language. When people want to detach from responsibility, their language shifts subtly. Instead of saying, "I broke the vase," they might say, "The vase got broken." Instead of "I lied," they say, "There was a misunderstanding." The self disappears from the sentence. Pronouns shift. Ownership fades. The event becomes passive. This is not always malicious. Sometimes it's shame, sometimes it's fear. But it is distance, and distance inside language often reflects distance inside intention. Listen for pronouns. I becomes we to me becomes they becomes you, they becomes you. Responsibility moves around the room. And when responsibility moves too often, something is unstable. Here's the surprising insight. Deception increases cognitive load, and cognitive load changes speech patterns. When the brain is busy maintaining a false narrative, it has less bandwidth for natural flow. This can result in fewer contractions, more formal phrasing, odd sentence structures, delayed responses. Someone who normally says "I didn't" might say "I did not." It sounds subtle, but language under strain stiffens, because the mind is multitasking, maintaining consistency, monitoring your reaction, suppressing leakage, constructing plausibility. That is heavy work, and heavy work leaves fingerprints. Now slow down with me. Imagine someone answering a difficult question. Before they respond, there is a slight pause. Not the pause of reflection, the pause of calculation. Then the sentence arrives, polished, structured, almost too clean. You may not consciously identify it, but you feel something rehearsed. Confidence is often rehearsed, and rehearsal has rhythm. Let's explore another layer. When telling the truth, people tend to include sensory details naturally. What they saw, what they heard, what they felt. When fabricating, people often lean into logical explanations rather than sensory recall, because you can invent logic more easily than sensation. If a story sounds mechanically coherent but emotionally flat, notice that. Emotional absence where emotion should exist is a signal. Not proof, but signal. There is also something called temporal inconsistency. When recounting truth, timelines tend to flow organically. When constructing deception, time references can become rigid or oddly precise. At exactly 8:17 p.m. specificity can be genuine, or it can be armor. Context determines which. Now let's bring this inward. Have you ever over-explained yourself when you didn't need to? Have you ever softened responsibility through phrasing? It just happened. It kind of turned into language protects ego. This is human, which means when you hear it in others, approach it with curiosity, not accusation, because language leakage reveals discomfort before it reveals intent. Here's something powerful. You don't need to interrupt someone to detect verbal leakage. You simply need to listen without being hypnotized by narrative length. Short question, long answer. Why? Simple situation. Complex justification. Why? Ownership avoided. Why? If you quietly ask why 3 times in your mind while listening, patterns begin to surface. But remember something essential. Not every long story is a lie. Not every pronoun shift is deception. You are tracking clusters. Over-explaining plus distancing plus rigidity. When multiple signals align, probability increases. Detection is about accumulation, not single clues. Let the pace slow. You are learning to hear texture. Texture in words, texture in pauses, texture in emphasis. The truth does not need decoration. It stands quietly. Deception often dresses itself. And yet words are only one layer. Because what happens when someone says very little? When answers are minimal, clipped, withheld. If words can betray truth, what about silence? The power of strategic silence. After someone answers you, do nothing. No nod, no reassurance, no follow-up, just silence. Most people cannot tolerate it, and that is where the truth begins to surface. Silence makes liars work. When words stop, pressure rises, and pressure reveals structure. You have been trained to fill gaps in conversation, to smooth tension, to rescue awkwardness. But awkwardness is not your enemy. It is your instrument. Here is something subtle about you. You dislike conversational tension. When a pause stretches longer than expected, your nervous system wants to repair it. So you speak. You clarify. You soften. You add context. You relieve the other person. And the moment you do, you give away control. The one who speaks first loses control. Because silence transfers psychological weight. Imagine this. You ask a direct question. Did you send that message? The person responds quickly. No. Instead of moving on, you hold their gaze. 3 seconds. Not aggressive, not confrontational. Just present. 1, 2, 3. Something shifts. They may add more. Well, I forwarded it, but I didn't actually write it. The silence invited expansion. Expansion invites leakage. Here's the surprising insight. Silence increases cognitive load. When someone is lying, they are already managing multiple processes, maintaining consistency, monitoring your reaction, suppressing emotional leakage, tracking details. When you remove conversational movement, their mind has nowhere to escape. They must sit inside their own narrative, and often, they begin adjusting it. The adjustment is the tell. Silence is not interrogation. It is neutrality. If you use silence with hostility, it triggers defense. If you use silence with calm curiosity, it amplifies discomfort internally. Discomfort is revealing, because discomfort seeks relief, and relief often comes through extra information. Let's slow this down. There are 3 types of silence you can use. First, post-answer silence. After they respond, hold still. No validation, no reaction. This invites elaboration. Second, interrupted silence. When someone is mid-explanation and pauses to think, do not rescue them. Let the gap widen. The next words will often be less filtered. Third, reflective silence. Repeat their key phrase back softly. You were there briefly, and then stop. Mirrored phrase creates internal review, and review can destabilize weak narrative. Now a small challenge. In your next conversation, hold eye contact 3 seconds longer than usual after someone finishes speaking. Not staring, not intense, just steady. Observe what happens. You will notice micro adjustments, blink rate shifts, throat swallowing, self-soothing gestures. Additional clarification. Silence exposes rhythm changes. There is something powerful about remaining still. Stillness unsettles the rehearsed, because rehearsed answers rely on flow. When you interrupt the flow, structure cracks. But let's add nuance. Silence does not always reveal deception. Sometimes it reveals anxiety. Sometimes it reveals insecurity. This is why your tone matters. You are not hunting. You are observing. The goal is not to trap. It is to see. Now imagine this scenario. Someone gives you a complicated explanation. You feel slight confusion. Instead of asking another question immediately, you wait. 5 seconds. The space grows. Often they will fill it with clarification you didn't request. That clarification is rarely random. It is guided by what they fear you might suspect. And fear directs emphasis. Here's something even more subtle. When someone is truthful, silence feels reflective. When someone is deceptive, silence feels threatening. Truth rests. Deception scans. You can sense the difference in energy. Not dramatic, just texture. Let your breathing slow. Silence requires emotional control from you as well. Because when you remain quiet, you feel the discomfort too. And if you rush to soothe it, you protect the other person's narrative. If you tolerate it, you allow reality to settle. There's another reason silence works. Humans are wired to complete unfinished patterns. A pause feels unfinished, and unfinished patterns create psychological tension. The brain wants closure, so it supplies more, often too much. But here is the caution. Silence is a tool, not a weapon. Used excessively, it becomes manipulation. Used strategically, it becomes clarity. The difference lies in intention. Are you trying to intimidate or understand? Now notice something. Up until now, we've explored signals of stress, micro-expressions, body shifts, verbal leakage, silence under pressure. But there is a category of individuals for whom stress is minimal. They do not tremble. They do not over-explain. They do not crumble under silence. They remain composed, measured, almost unnervingly calm. And that calm can be the most dangerous signal of all. Because the most dangerous liars don't look nervous at all. The calm manipulator, high-functioning deceivers, some people don't feel guilt. Let that settle for a moment. Not less guilt. Not delayed guilt. Not rationalized guilt. None. You assume everyone feels something when they lie. A flicker, a tremor, a crack in the voice. You've been listening for stress, but what if there is no stress? What if the person across from you is perfectly calm, because they experience no internal conflict at all? That possibility changes the game. And if you're still here, listening carefully, it's because some part of you already sensed this. You've met someone like this before, composed, charming, unshakable, and something about them felt off. Most deception leaks under pressure. We've explored that. Silence makes liars work. Cognitive load exposes inconsistency. But high-functioning deceivers don't overload easily. They prepare, they rehearse, they study you while you think you're studying them. Psychological tension rises here, because this is where your usual tools begin to fail. Charm is often a weapon. Not loud charm, not cartoonish charisma, measured charm. The kind that feels attentive, the kind that mirrors your tone, the kind that remembers small details about you. They don't connect emotionally, they simulate connection. And simulation, when practiced enough, becomes indistinguishable from authenticity. Here is what makes them different. Most people lie to escape consequences. High-functioning deceivers lie to shape reality. There is a difference. One reacts, the other designs. You might be thinking, I would notice. Would you? They maintain eye contact comfortably. Their body is relaxed. Their speech is paced. No fidgeting, no micro-tremor, no visible discomfort, because guilt is what destabilizes most liars, and some individuals do not experience guilt in the way you do. This is not drama. It is neurological variation. Now here's the surprising insight. The calm manipulator does feel something, just not remorse. They feel stimulation. Control activates reward circuits. Influence feels exciting. Deception becomes a performance, and you are the audience. Notice how that shifts the dynamic. You are not confronting a nervous liar. You are interacting with someone who may enjoy the exchange. That is why traditional interrogation tactics fail. Pressure doesn't scare them. It energizes them. So how do they operate? First, rehearsed empathy. They study emotional language. I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you. The tone is perfect. The facial expression is aligned. But if you look closely, the timing is slightly off. It feels placed. Empathy is reactive and fluid. Simulated empathy is precise. Too precise. Too precise. Second, strategic vulnerability. They reveal small, controlled weaknesses, just enough to disarm you. I've struggled with trust too. Now you feel bonded. But notice something. Their vulnerability rarely costs them anything. It doesn't expose leverage. It builds it. Adaptive mirroring. You lean back. They lean back. You lower your voice. They match it. This creates unconscious rapport. Your nervous system interprets similarity as safety, and safety lowers your guard. Here is where tension spikes, because now you realize something uncomfortable. The very behaviors you were taught to look for in healthy connection are the same tools a skilled manipulator uses: warmth, attentiveness, confidence. It is camouflage. But there is a tell, not an anxiety, inconsistency. High-functioning deceivers manage impressions, not integrity. Their stories align when observed moment to moment, but zoom out and patterns shift. Values drift depending on the audience. Boundaries flex when advantageous. Loyalty feels conditional. You don't catch them in a single lie. You notice subtle moral repositioning over time. And here's another quiet indicator. They rarely apologize without strategy. If they do apologize, it redirects. I'm sorry you felt that way. Responsibility becomes abstract. Impact becomes your interpretation. Pause with that. You are not paranoid for noticing patterns. You are perceptive. There is a difference. Now let's ground this. Not every calm person is manipulative. Not every charming person lacks empathy. Calm can be maturity. Charm can be social intelligence. The key distinction is emotional depth. When real empathy is present, there is cost. True remorse disrupts composure. It lingers, Simulated remorse evaporates quickly. You may feel a subtle unease around these individuals, not fear, not obvious danger, just imbalance. Conversations feel like performances. You leave interactions slightly drained, as if you were managed. That sensation matters. Your nervous system often detects incongruence before your conscious mind articulates it. But here is the final layer. High-functioning deceivers do not see themselves as villains. They justify. They rationalize. They believe outcomes matter more than honesty. And because they remain calm, others defend them. He's just confident, or she's misunderstood. Their composure becomes evidence of innocence, and emotional people appear unstable by comparison. That inversion is powerful. So what protects you? Not suspicion of everyone, not constant interrogation. It is pattern awareness over time. It is noticing how someone behaves when there is nothing to gain. It is watching how they treat people who cannot benefit them. It is observing whether their empathy remains when it costs them something. And most importantly, it is maintaining your own center. Use mainter. Manipulators thrive on emotional reactivity. When you remain grounded, you become harder to steer, slower to trust blindly, but not closed. Discernment is not paranoia. It is calibrated openness. You do not need to fear calm people. You need to understand them. Because the world does not only contain nervous liars. It contains composed architects of perception. And the more you understand the architecture, the less likely you are to live inside someone else's design. But this raises a question that lingers beneath everything we've explored. If stress isn't always visible, if charm can be camouflage, if empathy can be rehearsed, so how do you protect yourself without becoming paranoid? Training your inner lie detector. Don't look for lies, look for changes. That single shift will transform everything, because lies are not stamped on foreheads. They don't announce themselves with dramatic music. They rarely explode into obvious contradictions. They whisper. And whispers are only detectable when you know the original sound of someone's voice. You've spent the last chapters learning signals, micro-expressions, strategic silence, calm manipulators. But here's the truth most people miss. There is no universal lie face. There is only deviation. And deviation requires a baseline. You're more perceptive than you think. You already sense when something is off. You just override it. You rationalize. You excuse. You tell yourself you're overthinking. But what if that subtle signal is data, not proof, not accusation? Just data. Baseline observation is your first discipline. Before you ever evaluate truthfulness, you study normal. How does this person usually speak? How fast do they blink? How animated are their hands? How detailed are their stories? This is neutral watching, no suspicion, no agenda. Just pattern gathering. Here's a microhook to anchor you. Trust patterns, not moments. A single fidget means nothing. A single pause means nothing, but a cluster of changes. Under pressure, aligned with a sensitive topic. That's movement. Movement matters. Imagine someone who is normally expressive, open gestures, steady eye contact, fluid speech. Now, when a specific topic arises, their body tightens, arms fold, eye contact fragments, details thin out. You're not detecting a lie, you're detecting contrast. Contrast is where questions live. Now pause with me. This isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about becoming observationally literate. There is power in watching without reacting. Here is something surprising. Your intuition is not mystical. It is compressed pattern recognition. Your brain absorbs thousands of microsignals below conscious awareness. Tone shifts, timing changes, breathing irregularities. When you say something feels off, what you're actually saying is, I detected deviation. The problem is not intuition. The problem is calibration. Calibration means checking your emotional filters. Are you tired, triggered, insecure? When you are emotionally activated, your baseline perception distorts. You see threat where there is none. Or you miss threat because you want connection. Your inner lie detector only works when you are regulated. So how do you train it? Slow down. Most deception slips past because conversations move too fast. We respond instead of observe. We prepare our next sentence instead of studying the current one. Silence helps. Stillness helps. Breathing helps. Here's your exercise. Tomorrow, observe 3 people. Tomorrow, observe 3 people. Just watch. Don't analyze aggressively. Don't interrogate. Notice their natural rhythm, how they laugh, how they transition between topics, how they respond when interrupted. You're building mental reference points, and once you see baseline clearly, deviation becomes louder. But there's a deeper layer. Pattern recognition requires time. High-functioning deceivers survive because people judge in snapshots, moments, isolated incidents. But patterns expose truth. Does their story shift slightly depending on the audience? Do they mirror values selectively? Do promises erode quietly over weeks? Moments can be explained. Patterns require accountability. Now let's address something uncomfortable. Sometimes the change you detect isn't deception. It's fear, or shame, or trauma. Not all tension equals lying. That's why context matters, compassion matters. Discernment without empathy becomes paranoia. Empathy without discernment becomes vulnerability. Balance is power. Here's another micro loop for you. Watch consistency between words and behavior. If someone claims loyalty but disappears when inconvenient, if someone values honesty but avoids direct answers, if someone expresses care but ignores boundaries, the lie may not be verbal, it may be behavioral. Behavior sustains patterns longer than words can. And now we reach the inner layer. Your perception sharpens when your self-deception decreases. Yes, self-deception. Because here's the truth. The easiest person to lie to is yourself. You ignore red flags because you want the story to be true. You override discomfort because you crave belonging. You minimize inconsistencies because confrontation feels heavy. Your internal bias can blind your external detector. Sit with that. This chapter is not about catching others. It's about refining you. When you are honest with yourself, about your needs, fears, insecurities, you become harder to manipulate. Because manipulation exploits denial. There is a quiet strength in saying, I notice that change. Not accusing, not attacking, just noticing. Awareness alone shifts dynamics. People behave differently when they sense they are being accurately observed. And remember this, you do not need to expose every lie you detect. Sometimes awareness is protection enough. Distance can replace confrontation. Boundaries can replace debate. Not every truth requires a courtroom. As you continue training your inner lie detector, keep it grounded in curiosity, not cynicism. Curiosity asks, what changed? Cynicism declares, they're lying. One keeps you open, the other isolates you. Take a breath, feel your body. Notice your own baseline right now. Are you calm, tense, alert? Observation begins within. Because the clearer you see yourself, the clearer you see others. Tomorrow, watch 3 people. Build baseline. Notice rhythm, observe deviation. No judgment, just awareness. And as your perception sharpens, a final question begins to surface. Unsettling, necessary. You've learned to detect deception in others. But what happens when the liar is you? The lies we tell ourselves. We lie to survive, not in the obvious ways, not in ways that make headlines, but quietly, subtly, every day. You tell yourself stories to protect your identity, to preserve comfort, to avoid shame, to maintain the narrative you need to function. And sometimes, those stories are lies. Notice your own thoughts as you listen. Do you excuse someone's behavior because it's easier than confronting it? Do you minimize your own discomfort to avoid conflict? Do you repeat phrases like, I'm fine when your body screams otherwise? This is self-deception, and it is universal. It is a survival skill. Cognitive dissonance is the mechanism. Your brain cannot hold 2 conflicting truths comfortably. If your values clash with your actions, tension arises. You resolve it by rewriting reality. Not consciously, often not intentionally, but automatically. I didn't really want that promotion anyway. They didn't really mean to hurt me. I'm over it. Notice how familiar that feels. Here's a micro hook to anchor your attention. The hardest truth to see is your own. Others' lies are external. You can scrutinize, debate, expose. Your own lies live in your mind, silent, persistent, protected, and because they live inside you, they shape perception before any external signal even appears. Think of a time you were certain of something, only to realize later that your belief was motivated by fear, pride, or convenience. That is self-deception in action. It shields you from immediate pain, but it carries subtle costs, missed opportunities, distorted relationships, moments you cannot reclaim. Here's the surprising insight. Self-deception is often adaptive. It preserves function under stress. It reduces overwhelm. It allows you to act decisively even when the truth is uncomfortable. But adaptation comes at a price, clarity, and clarity is what allows you to detect deception in others. Slow down now. Listen to your own breath. Feel your body. Notice the tension you carry. Notice the stories you tell yourself to justify, to excuse, to endure. Some are harmless, some are protective, some subtly toxic, and all of them influence how you perceive the world. We lie to ourselves for many reasons: to protect identity, to maintain control, to avoid shame, to avoid vulnerability. Each lie is a small shield. Each shield changes perception. Each change alters behavior, and the cumulative effect can be profound. Here is a reflective exercise. Take a recent decision. Ask yourself, why did I choose this? Was it desire, duty, fear, pride, comfort? Now peel away the rationalizations. What remains? The core motivation often surprises you. It often conflicts with the story you've been telling yourself. And this is where real awareness begins. Because once you recognize self-deception, you gain choice. You can maintain the illusion as most do, or you can act in alignment with truth, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it requires courage. Consider the parallels to detecting deception in others. If you can't see your own distortions, you miss the subtle patterns around you. Your baseline is skewed. Your intuition is compromised. Your inner lie detector falters. Awareness of self is inseparable from awareness of others. Another microhook. We lie to survive. And survival is not always about physical threat. Sometimes it is about social cohesion. Sometimes it is about emotional protection. Sometimes it is about identity preservation. The lie feels necessary. But necessity doesn't equal accuracy. Let the pace slow even more. Sit with this quietly. Every narrative you've embraced, every justification you've repeated, every version of yourself you've protected, all of them contain elements of truth, and all contain elements of illusion. Self-deception is not weakness, it is human, but awareness transforms it into power. When you notice your own distortions, you can correct them. You can align actions with values. You can interact with others from clarity instead of assumption. You can listen for truth without being trapped by illusion. Take another deep breath. The mind tends to resist discomfort, but reflection requires it. Observation of self is the ultimate practice of honesty. You are not being judged. You are being trained. To see, to notice, to calibrate. And now the quiet reflection. If truth is power, are you ready to carry it? Are you ready to face the stories you tell yourself? The patterns you have ignored? The subtle ways you protect identity at the cost of clarity? Because the world rewards awareness, and self-deception is the only deception that truly controls you. The cost of knowing. Once you learn to see deception, you notice it everywhere. Not just in strangers, not just in the headlines, not just in the obvious betrayals. You notice it in politics, in friendships, in families, in business deals, and quietly in yourself. Because awareness is not selective. It casts light indiscriminately. You might think that seeing clearly is liberating, and it is in some ways, but clarity has a cost. Because when you detect manipulation, it creates tension. You cannot ignore it. You cannot unsee it. And yet you must navigate life alongside it. Think of the last time someone smiled at you while their words contradicted their tone. Did it make you uncomfortable? Did it create a flicker of doubt you could not shake? That discomfort is part of the cost. The human mind was not designed to notice deception constantly. It was designed to trust, to bond, to assume goodwill. And now you are shifting that balance. Discernment is not cynicism. Paranoia is not vigilance. And yet, The difference is subtle. You may catch yourself analyzing too much, looking for deception where none exists, reading intention where it is irrelevant. This is the trap, because knowledge without wisdom becomes a burden. Here's a micro hook to keep your focus. The real skill is not in catching lies. It is in responding wisely to them. When you notice manipulation, do you react immediately? Do you confront? Do you withdraw? Or do you pause and choose the path that preserves clarity, dignity, and composure? The pause is your ally. High-functioning deceivers, subtle liars, everyday distortions, these are all around you. You will meet people who lie without guilt, people who charm with precision, people who protect themselves with stories they repeat silently. Your task is not to punish them. Your task is to navigate with awareness, to maintain your center while observing the patterns around you. Here is the surprising insight. Clarity is not about controlling others. It is about controlling your own perception, your attention, your emotional response. When you respond with awareness rather than instinct, manipulation loses power. Now pause with me. Breathe in, breathe out. Feel the weight of what you have learned. It is heavy, because perception is responsibility, because understanding brings both insight and burden, because you cannot unknow what you now see, and yet this weight carries freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to interact consciously, freedom to set boundaries without guilt, freedom to act with integrity even when others do not, because clarity does not demand isolation. It does not demand distrust. It demands truth. Think back to the micro-expressions, the verbal leakage, the strategic silences. Every subtle shift, every fleeting gesture, every carefully constructed narrative now becomes readable. Not because you are suspicious, because you are attuned, because you observe without needing to judge, because you see patterns instead of moments. This is skill. This is power. This is responsibility. Here's another quiet truth. The hardest deceptions are those hidden within ourselves. Self-deception, rationalization, denial. These are the subtle liars that influence every decision you make. And because you can now detect nuance in others, you begin detecting it in yourself. This can be uncomfortable, but discomfort is the gateway to growth. Let your mind slow. Imagine a world where everyone sees manipulation perfectly, where every false word is immediately understood, where every hidden motive is unveiled. The weight would be unbearable. Yet clarity does not demand omniscience. It demands selective awareness, observation tempered with compassion, insight balanced with humanity. Take another breath. Notice your body. Notice your heartbeat. Notice the quiet space where reflection occurs. This is where the cost of knowing becomes tangible. You are awake, you are aware, and the world now requires a new form of navigation. And finally, let this settle with a reflective pause. Once you learn to see deception, you'll notice it everywhere. In politics, in relationships, in yourself. But the goal is not to become cold. The goal is clarity. And clarity is freedom. Long pause. If this awakens something in you, stay with us. There is more to uncover, because knowing is only the beginning, and mastery is in how you carry it.